It is taking, I think, time to share.
Is it not visible even now?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I'm not able to see. Actually, it has not come yet. It is saying starting to share the content. Can you try one more time, ma'am?
But
Stop.
I
Stop
can
and
see. Yeah, 1 second. Can you see now?
no, ma'am. हाँ सर. क्लाउड. आपको मैडम का स्क्रीन दिखा रहा है क्या? मेरे को दिखा नहीं रहा. ठीक है. मेरा ना हैंग हो गया सर. आपको मैडम से कम्युनिकेट कर लो है क्या? मेरा तो काम ही नहीं कर रहा है. कुछ नहीं दिखा रहा है. चालू करिए. हाँ, बोल दो. मैं क्लोज करूँगा. बेस्ट फिर से स्टार्ट कर लूंगा थोड़ी देर में. आप बोल दो क्या? मेरा पूरा हैंग मार गया है. पूरा सिस्टम. मेरे को तो कुछ भी नहीं आ रहा ना. मेरा तो ये वर्क सी मैं क्लोज कर रहा हूँ बस. ये तो ओपन ही नहीं हो रहा है मेरा कुछ. क्या हो गया नहीं पता अचानक से. हाँ, आप अभी होस्ट हो ना. मैं यहाँ से क्लोज हो रहा फिर से लॉग इन करता हूँ. ठीक है. ठीक है. वेट कर रहा हूँ. सर मैडम स्टार्ट कर दिया ना? अच्छा. फिर हाँ, फिर सुन नहीं पाएंगे. वही.
How long is my session? Can you see the screen now?
Yes, madam. Screen is visible now.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think there is some lag in the duration of session timings, right? So now, till when can I take the session?
Yes, you can continue.
Up to when? I mean, 3:30
As
or
per schedule, it is 3:45.
okay.
So up to 3:45 you can.
Okay, right. Thank you. So can I start or should we wait for few more participants?
We can start now.
Okay. So very good afternoon to everyone. So today the session that we will be discussing on is about the web application security. So we will try to understand the security vulnerabilities, whatever threats that can occur to the applications and how the attacks happen on the applications in developers point of view as well as in the attackers point of view. Both ways I will try to explain you today. So in case of any questions, please feel free to put up in the chat box. We'll discuss on application security and the OWASP top 10 issues, top 10 vulnerabilities that are mostly known to be available or mostly seen in most web applications in today's date. So we'll discuss on this. So our agenda of this session is something like this. Like we will understand. We'll initially have some understanding onto basics onto web, and we'll know certain things that are mandatory to know or to understand in order to understand the concept. And we'll see on how the misuse of information is being done, which is getting revealed or leaked from our websites, how it is being leaked, how we have to stop this leakage. And then we'll try to understand on the top 10 vulnerabilities like the SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and so on. So due to this 1 hour 15 minutes duration, it would be difficult to cover all of these things. But however, considering the participants are into this domain, I'll try to put some lesser time on the introduction part and we'll move towards WASP top 10 majorly. In case someone have any doubt on specific topic, please let me know. We can try to discuss during that time on that. So I hope this is okay. Now, to understand onto web, we know web applications are most known today. Everybody is using web applications. Everyone is using at the homes. All the organizations are hosting websites, many websites. In fact, now website, along with website, mobile app has also become common for most organizations. Any site I launch, they're trying to even develop a mobile application wherein the same website is visible on the end users apps to make the information more reachable and to make it more convenient. If it is coming to the LMS or any kind of other activities, even there, they're trying to give a user much beneficial by hosting it to mobile apps. So the web is now not restricted onto the desktops only, but now the web is also available in the mobiles. So there are so many threats that can occur to the web applications, which can impact either the end user or the owners of the websites. So earlier, what we used to do, being if I'm hosting an application or a website in my data center, in my own server, opening it for the public to use, I try to protect it by putting up some kind of firewalls in my organization. I put up intrusion detection systems. I put up intrusion prevention PC system. I do a lot of logs management so that I protect my environment securely. So this environment is called as a DMZ, demilitarized zone. So we try to protect our applications on the network infrastructure that we host. This is what we usually do at the organization or institutional level. And at the home users, that is the end user who is using any website or who is connecting to internet, it is general tendency that they use an operating system level firewall being turned on always. We need to have a good antivirus, a good anti-keylogger solution. All these things we put in the systems so that if something misuse is happening, these softwares can protect us. So this is how we protect our environment. So though we are doing all of these things, still we regularly see that there are so many websites being hacked, so much of information leaked. We see news about Twitter information is leaked, Big Basket information is leaked. Recently, even the JIT version control system had a vulnerability due to which the exploits were possible. So why all of these things are happening? Are they not having these firewalls, IDS, IPS and all? They do have, but there is something that is missing in the application due to which these kind of hacks are happening. So we'll try to throw some light onto what can be there, but this is not limited to, there are so many more vulnerabilities which are leading to such problems in the websites. So let us understand, like in the internet world, generally the left boxes, computers, what you're seeing are the end users. And in the right side, what you're seeing in the orange circle, they are the demilitarized zones in the organization. We are just trying to depict the secured environment in which the servers have been hosting. Servers are having some applications been running. And end users access these websites over through the internet. Now, when this kind of access is happening, there are lot many people who is watching this communication. There's a lot of information that flows from the end user to the servers, target servers. Similarly, from the target servers to the end users. So when this communication happens, this information, lot of information, whatever is flowed between these systems from the source to the destination, or we should say from the client to the server, there are so many things that are visible and there are so many people who are actually watching them, so that as soon as they find the weakest moment or the right time, they try to perform the actual hack on the systems. So in this session, we will try to understand what kind of information flows, how these are trying to used by to perform the attacks. So before we go ahead, when I said a demilitarized zone, as we discussed, it is an environment where a secured IDs, firewalls, all of these things are placed in. And mostly, most administrators consider them to be the general mites. That is, their thumb rules that, yes, I have these things, so I'm protecting my environment. Now coming to the developer also thinks that since he is hosting his website on a HTTPS, definitely my website is secure. Nobody else can hack my website. Also, people think that since I'm hosting it on port 80, it is secure enough. There are many cases where it's been presumed that if I host application on port 8080, 8081 or 6060, something like that, they consider that it can be hackable. But it is not like that. The hack is happening because of issues in the application, but not on the port number or something. So these are the general mites which generally developers and administrators consider them to be followed, and thus they are safe. Unfortunately, this is not sufficient enough to protect our environment. Why? Because as you see here, The firewall is something which is playing a critical role for developer as well as for the administrators, wherein they are deciding something like that. The role of the firewall is it is trying to block the unnecessary ports and allow only the port that is required by the application. And most in web application case, port number 80 and 443 are the most known or required ports, and thus they are being allowed. Though it is HTTPS, still these kind of attacks are there, attacks like SQL injections, parameter tampering, cross-site scripting, which are still possible on HTTP or HTTPS and can get through the firewalls safely to your. And through these attacks only, the application level attacks are possible. They can also reach up to your web server that is hosted on the server, like Apache. They can also control the Tomcat, the IIS web server, whatever we are using. Similarly, they can also even control the operating system, underlying operating system. Through the web-based attack, one can even create an administrative user on the operating system. One can open up unnecessary ports on the operating systems. Not only this, from this environment, they can even reach your database and perform attacks on the databases. So having things open in this port 80 itself is sufficient to perform all of these kinds of attacks. So as we have discussed, why these attacks are happening is what we will try to have a glimpse onto. Like I was saying, a request goes from client to server. Wherever I depict this kind of icon wherein browser is visible, consider that to be a client, and the right side is the server. So whenever there is a request going from the client to server, there's a request that is whatever goes from client to server, it is called as a request. And from server, when something comes back, it is called as a response. So when a request goes and the response turns back, there are so much information that flows across. So what's that information? Usually, it is something like this. It will have a lot of headers over here. So let us not go in depth into this. However, I'll just show you what exactly happens. Yeah. So this is my browser. I hope you can see my browser with the Facebook bin logged in, the login page of the Facebook. Now, generally, when we type any website, what we do usually as soon as I type in, say for example, I type cdac.in itself. In fraction of seconds, I get the web page loaded. Similarly, if I type my other website, infosecawareness.in, in 2 to 3 seconds, the website gets loaded in this fashion, right? Now, when this is getting loaded, there is something that is happening in the systems. That is, from my browser, there is a request going to the server, and server responds back with its results. So when the request is going and the response is coming back, there is a lot of information that flows across the systems. What is that information flowed is what we will understand. For example, let us take this constraint. If you take your latest version of the Firefox browser and access any website, while you're accessing, try to press the key combination of function F12. Function key F12. When you press that, you will get this kind of a window in the bottom. So when I access any website, you try to refresh your page once again. When you generally, if it is the first time, then you will see the first tab, inspector tab open generally. But you will have to go to the network tab in order to analyze the application's headers generally. So this is the network tab, the fourth tab which I am clicking on to. Click on the network tab and then you refresh your screen once again. So the moment you refresh your screen, there are some content being loaded in this network tab. As you see here, this is something where the first request, what you're seeing here, it is a get method on this particular domain on the home. So when I click on this, and then you can see some window, a small window opening up in the right side. These are called as the headers. So as I was saying, when a request is going, the headers get sent. Request headers are sent. When a response comes back from server, the server's response is being read at the client end. So to see that, I'll just go in the right side. I'm just scrolling down. This is, as you see here, this is the request headers. Request is something which goes from client to server. I'll just convert this to the raw mode and I'll expand this. Please ping me if something is not visible or if something is not understood. So as you see here, this is called as the request header. So when we are typing a domain name in a browser, at that moment, the browser automatically builds this content and sends to the server. So when it is sending this, it is sending that I am requesting from client the home page, / means the home page of this particular domain. And it is also giving me statistics, giving the server information that what browser I'm using, what is my browser supporting. It supports loading HTML, XML and all. Which language I'm using. So based on this, if somebody is using a system from China or from other language, a Japanese or somebody, the language will automatically go from here. Thus, the server will try to show the information in that language if they have the support. Similarly, which encoding format I support, my cookies, and so on. Now, when this information is going from server to the client, the server also responds back. In response, what you are seeing generally is, as you see, in fraction of seconds, we were able to see this website being loaded. But what we do not see generally, but it is also part of the content, is this header. Server also sends this information along with this beautiful HTML page that you can see with lot of images, graphics and all visible. So this is the information which mostly used by the people who are trying to understand about our applications. It will try to tell information about what web server we are using, what my headers, what kind of headers I have, and all of this information. So not only server, there are few more things which usually goes. Let's come back to Facebook just to see the login kind of an environment. So say for example, I use facebook.com and I enable the same headers over here. As you see, as soon as I load a facebook.com, you can see there's a request and response coming, and in the response, these are the response headers that are coming from Facebook. As you see here, it is showing us which version of HTTP it is using, and these are certain headers about the server, and you will also see security headers available over here. So these kind of headers are usually part of every response that comes from the server, and those headers usually reveal sensitive information about the applications. Now let me take an example of my own system which is hosted in this system and a local host. If I'm not securing properly, then what happens? For example, this is one test website I have here, and I open up a header over here. So as you see here, when I'm logging in and accessing this page, you see the response headers, it shows me that my server is Apache Coyote 1.1. So this means usually it is a Tomcat server. Then only you will see this kind of a header. And this is the date that I'm using my system. Along with this, sometimes even we see what kind of modules are enabled, and also many misconfigurations can still be visible. So this is the data that flows from the end user, from a client to the server usually. So much of information. So this is a screenshot of one of it, wherein we can see when a request goes, a referrer, a host, user agent, and all comes in. So referrer header is one important thing. Recently, Google also have released one security plugin wherein referrer header is being removed or to for security reasons. So if you see the response header, in the response header, you can see the server names, the content length, and so on. There are many more informations usually you can see from the response headers. So this is the first and foremost place where for any hacker, he will try to understand which web server you are using, what kind of methods you have them enabled, which version. Sometimes since it is hardened, you can see only Apache, but there are cases where we also see a specific module number, which packages you have, what version of operating system you are using. All of that information gets revealed from the response headers. This is how the request and response flows with the data that is we can see in the browsers. Is this clear till now? I'm just giving a brief about the request response content part. So moving towards the same content, what we have seen just now, to see the same thing, we have three different mechanisms. One is to use the proxy kind of an environment, wherein this is a burp suite proxy. This also helps us to intercept the request and verify this content. Similarly, the same content we can see from the browsers, that what we have seen just now. That's called as the browser. So in the browser, we see in the F12 plugin, we can see the content like this, the headers. Similarly, if you see the same communication over the Wireshark packet, the same headers can be visible over here. Only thing is, if your website is using a HTTPS, that is a secure communication, then we do not see the headers like this because it will be encrypted. However, we can still see the get based content. I mean, to which website it is accessing, the get content will be visible even on the Wireshark packets. Yeah, so from the browser, usually if you pick up Chrome, you won't be able to see because Chrome is having, I mean, you can see, but you won't have a detailed information. Choose a Firefox browser for latest updated version and you press the function F12. Say, for example, this is my website. You need to press function key F12. Then by default, you will have an inspector tab. You can see here, there will be a tab called network. As you see, inspector, console, debugger, network. Generally, inspector and console are used by developers to fix certain problems with respect to the GUI designing. So network tab is something which is relevant to in security aspects. So after clicking on network tab, just refresh the page. Then when we refresh, you can see the very first. So when we refresh, generally, if I say, for example, I will try to click on login. You can see this is the login page that has come. Now, say, for example, I will enter my username and password. You can see the request links are coming over here. Since this is using a GET request, you can see my credentials passed over here itself. However, when I click this, in the right side, you get a header menu like this. And this is where you can see the request and response headers visible. This is the request header, wherein which page I'm accessing, which host I'm accessing, what is my referrer tag, my cookie header, all this information goes in the request. And the server responds back that, yes, I have the page that you're looking for, and it shows the content, along with which it also reveals, sends the server information. So this is how we can see from the browsers. Is that clear? Lieutenant Colonel Himanshu Jha. Okay, thanks. So we'll move ahead. Like the same content we can see in the Wireshark packet as well. You can also see this in the Burpsuite proxy. That is generally a proxy tool which you can freely download. And when you download, you need to configure it in the inception. Say, for example, let me show because that would be a little interesting and useful for you also. So I have a Burpsuite. So Burpsuite will also have a professional and community editions. Community edition is free. You can download and use it. In professional, which we need to buy, but it has some automated scanning options in the Burpsuite professional. And yes, it is a very good tool which can automatically scan and identify the vulnerabilities in the solutions, in the websites. Say this, I'm using a Burpsuite. I just started the software and temporary project has been chosen and I'm saying next and start Burpsuite. So when I'm initiating the Burpsuite, this is a tool which acts as a proxy, which acts as a scanner as well. So this is the interface of Burpsuite. So if you are trying to perform only the scanning on your applications and all, you can directly use this option of new scan. By choosing this, you can enter your website domain over here, http://localhost, and click on scan. It will start scanning the application. Otherwise, what we generally do in order to see the same content what we have just now seen on the browser, the headers, what you can do, you just go to the proxy tab. In the top, maybe if my screen is not very clear, let me know. I'll try to increase something. But you can see in the top, dashboard, target, proxy, intruder, repeater. There are so many tabs over here. We will choose proxy tab. And in the proxy tab, you will have an option of open browser. So if you are using the latest version of Burpsuite, you will have this. If you are having an older version, you won't see the browser option, but you will have to configure the proxy in your systems. So I click on open browser. I'm just trying to divide my screen into two for your understanding. Say this is the browser I opened and I put the proxy in the left half of my screen to show you. And in the right hand, you can see the browser opened up. Now what I will do, I'll just access my localhost application, which I was referring to. See here, you can see the interception is on. This blue button, what you're seeing, this is on. It means whatever I access in with this browser, every request and every response. Usually response doesn't come. For that, you'll have to come to options and choose intercept responses. Every request and response comes to this tool. Unless in this tool I forward, this request in my browser doesn't get loaded over here. So you see here, as soon as I typed in localhost 8080 application name, you can see this is the request. So this is something which is called as the request header that is formed by this browser, and it is trying to send to the server. So get, and this is the host name. It is telling which all my browser details, which languages I use, and all of these things. And the moment I say forward, it has sent another request. Again, I click forward. See, the moment you see HTTP 1.1, this is called as a response. Whenever there is a content, you see HTTP 1.1, 302 found, 200 OK, 404 not found. These are all the error codes, generally we say response codes. Whenever you see this kind of content, this is the response that is coming. Now you see, the response also has come, but the browser still you can see the page is not yet loaded because the proxy is trying to control the content. The moment I click on forward, again forward. See, now the HTML body has come. This is the HTML source of this particular page. When I click forward, now this browser in the right side, you can see the web page is getting loaded. The CSS is coming slowly. I'm clicking on forward. Then the page got loaded. So the proxy is a tool wherein we are trying to hold the request and response and see one by one. For each page, if you have hundreds of images, for each image, you will see a request being loaded in the proxy over here. So if I type in over here, see I clicked on customer login. Again, the request has come here. I need to forward this until I get the page over here. So when I log in and say login, see, you can see my login username password is available here. Even if you have HTTPS, in such case also this proxy can show the credentials in this way, plain text. So here if I choose a different user, for example, I'm trying to log in with admin in the browser, but here I'm trying to use a different user and say forward and forward. What happened? So I'm just changing my credential here to something else. Then forward. Okay. Okay, maybe this user is not available. I might have deleted during testing. I'll show you later. However, this is how the request and response we can intercept in the proxy tool and try to tamper or do or understand what request and response is flowing across through the proxy tools. So that's how we can analyze the headers in the browser or tools like proxies kind of tools or any kind of tamper data browser plugins are there which we can do the same. So this is some basic information on how we can analyze request response and how the information gets visible to end users without the content. Like as you see here, Microsoft IIS 6.0 is a version of the web server that you can see over here. So if somebody is trying to see this, they may be targeting IIS 6.0 related vulnerabilities on this domain. Forget about the application, whatever is being hosted. It might be hosting even a single static page also. If they are using a 6.0, an older version of web server, there are web server related attacks possible even on the static side, and the website can be defaced. So revealing information about the web server versioning, what technology they are using and all will help attackers to usually perform tuned attacks on the applications and perform the actual hacks what they wanted to do. So this is about some basic on to request response headers. So moving towards apart from this basic request response things, if at all you would like to understand a little more onto web application security technically, then these are certain key pointers that you need to explore to understand the attack perspectives, how to do, how the methods can be exploited and all. So usually what we see when I've just now typed in username password, you would have seen get. And similarly, in Gmail or in Facebook kind of a things, when you enter a login and all, you will see a word post. So get and post are two methods which we all know while developing applications. We might have come across that these methods we put across in the form to send the communication to the servers. Apart from these two methods, there are other methods like options, head, delete, put, which are also part of the web servers. And if web server is not configured properly to handle these methods, then attacks through these headers are also possible to deface a website. And apart from the methods, you will have to understand a little bit more on headers, cookies, what modules are there, all of these things. However, moving towards the actual vulnerabilities, because our main concern on to understanding how attacks happen. So these are some vulnerabilities which are known to SSL. See, one I'm trying to highlight on SSL initially itself because most of the times people consider that if HTTPS is there, if SSL is there, then there is no possibility of attacks happening on the application. But it is not like that. Even SSL is vulnerable to so many attacks. Even if you have SSL, there is a possibility to downgrade the SSL and still see the communication in plain text. Those possibilities are there. Even we can strip an SSL communication and see the content in plain text. That is the reason nowadays, if you see like any banking website or any critical applications which are trying to use the confidential data, apart from HTTPS also, you will have the data, username, passwords encrypted by application and then sending it on the SSL. Then what happens, even if SSL gets downgraded or SSL attack happens, the credentials at least are in safer way because application is encrypting it. So that is a two-level security we are adding for an application. So these are certain vulnerabilities which are mostly seen in the SSL, and shell shock is another vulnerability related to file uploads kind of a thing. However, I'll try to explain you one attack, which is a Heartbleed bug. Basically, Heartbleed is a vulnerability that has created a serious problem in SSL in the early 2098, in the early 2005 and 8 during that time. So this what happened is this was a vulnerability which was actually known to be there in SSL version since the beginning, but it got into the limelight only in the later point of time when already so much of disaster has happened to sensitive information. So if you try to understand this, you will understand that what kind of a simple flaws can lead to such bigger attacks. So I just show you a small picture with which you can understand. So I hope you all know SSL, right? SSL, what it does. Before I go here, as you know, SSL means it just tries to, there will be a client and server communication. And say, for example, you'll have a client and this is a client, right? And this is the server over here. Now, when any communication is going from client to server, this SSL is trying to actually protect the data in this part only. I mean, in the transportation, as you see our OSI models, you'll have a application layer. Application layer is somewhere over here, right? At the client side. Transportation layer is something where the actual communication is actually going on. And other layers, network layer, data link layer, and all falls into the other category. So the SSL is actually working for us at the transport layer. So when SSL is happening, all of the user credential that is being sent over here, it gets encrypted over here and sent. Server reads it and decrypts it. Again, server sends the content by encrypting it using its private key and sends back to the client. So this is how the SSL usually works on to. Correct. So now, if that is the case, what happened in case of an Heartbleed vulnerability was that yeah, so I hope you can see this screen, Heartbeat. So in this case, what happened is there is a client. A client is communicating with the server over SSL. When any client communication happens, if you see every request that we have just now seen, there will be a sentence called as content length. Did I show here? Every request that usually flows from server to client usually have a content length kind of a thing. I'm just coming to your headers part. This is the request header. Okay, there is no post data. I need to send a post data to see the content. So I just turn this off so that I can, yeah. I enter the seasonal product and then say yes. See here the request. Every request that goes that usually have a field called as a content length. If I see it in a raw mode, you will usually be able to see that. So content length defines how much of the content that I am trying to send from my client to the server. So in case of SSL also, such a header is available, which will try to define what I am trying to request for. I'm sorry for the delay. My system, I don't know, somehow it is a little slow. Some background applications are running. Yeah, I'm sorry. So I hope you can see the screen now. Can you see your screen with a heartbeat, normal usage and malicious usage kind of a thing? So there's a client that is sending a communication to server. It is asking me, send me this 4-letter word if you are there, bird. So the bird is a 4-letter word. So it is asking me, send me the 4-letter word bird. And the server receives that information. It says, yes, I have the 4-letter word, and it returns back the word bird over here. Now, in case of heartbeat vulnerability, in case of SSL, what happened was we were trying to communicate with the server for the same context, but we were telling, I want the 5-letter word bird. So when the server reads this information, along with the word bird, since the content length it is asking for is 500, server is trying to respond back with 500 digits length, 500 characters length response from its header, whatever it is having. So the server reverted back with the response with 500 length along with the word bird. So unfortunately, in the design of SSL itself, the design is made in something like after the credentials are there, followed by it, the master key of the encryption, whatever is happening, the key is being passed. So when that length is being increased to whatever has to be asked for, it is asking beyond that, server without verifying whether the word is 500 letters word or not, it is just trying to send the key whatever it is having. It is in fact trying to send the complete length whatever it is there the client is asking for. And with that, the length of the value, whatever is there, after that, whatever content is there, was being sent to client. And thus client was able to get the master key from the server, which includes in fact, the sensitive information of the end users. So over here, as you see, generally it is a very simple thing, right? Everybody says somebody is asking something, means we have to see whether that is really 4-letter word only, what is I'm having, and I need to send 4-letter only. That kind of a check I have to do at application and do. However, this is something that got missed out, and due to which by varying the content length, the server is able to decide upon how much content to be given based on the count that is asked by the client. So this is the issue which was been identified in SSL. Heartbeat. Heartbleed was the vulnerability name. Heartbeat is the kind of a technology which is behind it. So this kind of issues were there in SSL. Even today also, SSL is vulnerable to poodle, crime, breach, kind of so many attacks. So these attacks are trying to create problems to SSL environments. So we cannot rely 100% on the SSL communications considering they are secured enough. So yes, with this background on to web-based attacks and the SSL things, let us move towards the OWASP top 10. As you see here, OWASP is something where which releases the top 10 vulnerabilities regularly. So OWASP is basically an open web application security project. It's a community. It's not any organization. It is a community which is large across the world. There are so many experts in this particular community, and all the decisions that they do is an open community based. They release every few years. They release testing guides. They release checklists for developers. They release attack patterns. And they also release the top 10 vulnerabilities in web applications, in mobile applications, and so on. So OWASP With respect to web applications, it has its first release in 2003 and most recent was in 2017. So these are the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, which are known to be the most visible vulnerabilities in today's web applications. And so it is very much important for organizations to secure the applications against these vulnerabilities. So as you see here, from 2013 to 17, the vulnerabilities list, injection was almost always in the top from the beginning. Injection vulnerability or injection vulnerability, SQL injection, it can be HTML injection, framing, whatever. An injection flaw was always in the top one position as per OWASP. So most websites were vulnerable to this. Followed by broken authentication. Later on, cross-site scripting was in the A3 position. However, in the recent days, cross-site scripting has come down. This is because the browsers for cross-site scripting, the latest web servers itself have come out with certain security headers, due to which, though the applications were vulnerable, because of secure configuration of the web servers, the XSS exploitation has become a little difficult. And so the position of XSS has gone to 7th position, wherein the current A3 position was into sensitive data exposure. And this is where you can see sensitive data exposure has come to the 3rd position, wherein we can see the results of it. There are a lot of data leaks happened, data being breached out, so many sensitive information has been reviewed out and all, because they were not handled properly at the application level nor at the database level. Then XML XXC injection, XML external entity vulnerability has come to 4th position. That is, the reason is today most applications are web services oriented. As I said in the beginning, every website is now equally developing its mobile app. And the moment we have a mobile app, for the mobile application to load the content from a website, they use web services through JSON or through XML. They try to communicate with the website and receive the data to the mobile app. And so the web services based environment where XML based communications also increased a lot. Not only mobile app, in fact, there are many more reasons. I'm just giving one example. So XXC vulnerability is seen mostly in today's websites. Followed by, you can see there are many more vulnerabilities. And the last one, this is the new vulnerability which has been added. Earlier, never there was a logging related issue was seen in OWASP. This is the first time insufficient logging and monitoring kind of a vulnerability that has come out in the OWASP. The reason is, as you might be aware of risk management kind of a thing, how one has to manage any given risk and all. So many people either they mitigate, they try to reduce the risk, or they can avoid risk and many things. But to take any of these activities, one has to know how the risk has happened, how the attack has happened, how my organization's risk has increased severely, why my activities or why my systems are getting hacked regularly. I need to know the reason. I have to find out the root cause analysis. If I do not, then we cannot protect ourselves. Unless we know how somebody is attacking me, I can't protect myself, right? This was one basic reason for so many vulnerabilities also coming up also. That is the reason OWASP community have decided to put insufficient logging and monitoring into the one of the OWASP top 10. This is now mandatory for every website that is hosting to maintain the logging. Proper logging has to be maintained. If you're not maintaining properly, then you won't be, your website will not be compliant to OWASP top 10, 2017. So this is an overview comparison of 2013 to 17. So let's quickly see these vulnerabilities, how they are and how they are impacting. The very first and foremost, injection. So before I move, can I ask anybody has any questions, or you are able to follow me? Am I going speed? Any questions, or is it okay? Can I proceed further? Am I audible? Yeah, thank you, sir. I think only one response is coming. Anyone else? Are you all able to follow me? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Great. So yeah, so we will see the first vulnerability, OWASP top 10, injection. So injection is a very known vulnerability. As we see here, injection is something related to entering invalid data into the applications. So where it comes, how it comes, it all depends. So basically it is a tricking an application into including unintended commands into the data. So the data is sent to the application. Now, the data is processed at the server level by various interpreters. There can be SQL server which reads the data. There can be an LDAP server which reads the data and processes the systems, and many more. So if I'm doing an injection pertaining to SQL servers, it becomes an SQL injection. If I'm doing an injection pertaining to LDAP, it becomes LDAP injection. In fact, if I do a HTML injection, that is something where I'm affecting an end user's browsers, HTML injection. So injection means it is not only SQL injection, it can be an injection of any kind of a data resulting into different types of injection attacks. SQL injection, XPath injection, LDAP injection, OS injection, command injection, database injection, iframe injections, SSI injections, CSS injections. There are lots of injection types available based on the data that we inject. So to easily understand SQL is something which is very known to many of us. So let us understand SQL injection initially. So this is a small illustration of the SQL injection happening. Now there is an application, there's an attacker sitting who is accessing a website. So he tries to enter a username password into the system, and he tries to okay, let me show you. Yeah. So the user sends a request. Just now we have seen how a request goes from browser to the server. So like that, there is a request that is coming. In the request, the attacker have tried to inject something. So what is that? He's tried to enter a single quote or 1 equal to 1 kind of an entry, what we have just now shown in the right side. The moment it is been entered, any application, when any username or any account number is entered, the application's behavior is to take the input, process it, and then sends that to the next level. So over here, since this is related to the database, this request single quote or 1 is equal to 1 is being sent to the database. In the database, it executes and sends the result back to the server, that is the application server sitting in between. And from there, this reaches back to the attacker. So whatever the user is entering at the client side, in between application server is only a medium. But the code that is actually sitting over there, if that is not taking action over there, this kind of a revealing of lot of information from the database to the end user happens up. Say, for example, let us take this example of our application over here. You can see this application, right? I'll just show on the same screen. Yeah. So I just zoomed the applications page, I log out. Say, for example, this is your application where you have a username, password, login field. Generally, what happens is most developers, when I enter something which is not intended, we usually get an alert. Nowadays, even using HTML5, there is a validation being done. But that is all from the client side. As you see, I disable all of the securities from the client side, then also we can actually perform all of those attacks. So, for example, here you see I'm entering a username and I enter a password. I have logged into the system, and as you see here, I have become the administrator of the system. And you can see I have a menu over here, logout, home, preferences, and I also have a menu, admin menu, wherein some information of managing account, having a quarterly reports view. All of these pages are available for me. This is a quarterly report page. Okay. Now, I log out to the system, and I also have a products page where some data is there. Now this is a view of the entire application. Generally, any attacker, when he comes to your website, the very first and foremost thing after understanding about the headers, which we have seen just now, after the headers understanding, they come and see into the application. Where are all the entry points for me? What are the entry points? Entry point is something where somebody enters something. Any user can enter something into your application. That is the entry point. So something like this, the form, where this is there are some products over here. There is a search button. So I enter the same product name, click here, the product is searched. Say I enter something which is not there and I click search, there is no result. So this is one of the entry point. Similarly, customer login, this is another entry point where there are two fields. I need a new password. This is another form where there is one field. All of these are entry points. Now any attacker will try to understand all the entry points in the application. After that, he tries to see what the application is doing when I enter anything invalid. Say I'm entering a single quote over here. It's an invalid content and I click login. What is it the application doing? So now application has thrown me an error. The first and foremost thing is, as soon as I see a 500 error, it is nothing but the server side error. Server side errors are very dangerous for any application because they are errors which are actually meant for the developers. 500 errors help the developers to actually resolve the problem and fix the issues. So as you see here with this error, I can see that from this org, Apache, Jasper, JSP, Java kind of a thing, it's clear that it is a JSP based application. Now, as you can see, you can also see that there is a query visible over here. So the single code which we have entered just now is this. Since this value is gone over here and it is throwing me this error, it means that my entry, whatever I'm entering, and this is a database query, right? Generally, any application, if I'm entering a single code, what we expect a invalid data. You have entered invalid username. But there are applications which try to reveal this kind of a data also, where instead of saying invalid, they throw an error which is useful for developers to actually act upon. So when I see this, for an attacker, immediately he understands two things. Number one, my data is not being validated. It is directly going to the application. Number two, my data is reaching the database. That is the reason I'm seeing the database related query in the error page over here. So as soon as I get these two confirmations, immediately we can perform the followed attack. Generally in injection attacks, there are so many ways, but I'll just show you a magic code. This is called a magic code in the language of SQL injection. Single quote or 1 is equal to 1, semicolon, double hyphen. And then I have given a space. You believe me, this magic code was successful in almost 80% of the internet hosted applications that we have come across and audited in the recent days. So when we enter this, and I have not entered any password here. In fact, you see this is even not the username also, and I click login. It has taken me into the logged in state of the application. And you see I am an administrator. So without the user credentials of username or password, we are able to log in into the system, and we are also able to become an administrator over here. I'm able to access the entire system. I can even go to the home screen, enter some data also. It will allow me to even submit. There is no limit in I should not submit or something like that. So I can even submit these pages. It's all working normal, like as if I have logged in into a genuine system. How I was able to log in? Because of two things. Number one, there is no validation. Number two, the data is reaching the database. This is called as an SQL injection attack. Say, for example, I have seen a login query right earlier. Instead of entering a magic code, I am interested in creating new accounts in the system. Then what an attacker can do, he will try to utilize the database. An advantage is my data, whatever I'm entering here, it is reaching the database. So what I would do, I'll try to, initially when I entered single quote, I understood that select star from user where login is equal to so and so. It means that there is a table called user, and one of the column name in the table is login. Now with this information, what I would try, I'll put single quote group by login, then semicolon, double hyphen, space. Then I enter. You see there is another 500 error. Now I'm not seeing query directly here, but there is some root cause error that has been revealed from the 500 error. And here you can see user.user ID. In fact, this error meaning is that it is trying to help the developer, saying that you have entered group by clause on a login field. It may be wrong. Maybe you should try on another field. And the other field is user ID. So it is giving me a hint what is the next field. In fact, the hint is useful for the attackers. Now I enter single quote or group by login, comma, group by user ID. Again I enter login. I can see the next field, user.pass. Again enter. In this way, by injecting each value one by one, I can get the complete table structure of the database. If I'm able to do group by, I can even execute an insert query, right? Otherwise, I can execute a query called as drop table user. The complete user table can be dropped out. So this is the danger or impact of data not being validated by the applications. And please note, if the validation is done using a JavaScript or HTML5, both are client-side validations, still we can perform these attacks on the server very easily. So the validation should be done at the server side. So this is how the SQL injection works. However, for you to have a little more glimpse onto, I'll just show you a reason for why this is successful. This is a small code snippet. I just put up a PHP based of example. Generally, this is the query that we usually put, right? In our databases, we try to put select star from user where login equal to star, password equal to KitKat. So this is the username password and I'm trying to fetch the content. When we write this in the program, what we do, you see where SQL is the variable name. In this variable, I'm putting a query. Instead of username password, I put a variable. So this variable gets replaced with whatever content we enter in the input field. Now, when this content, what we entered a magic code has been entered, the red font, what you're seeing here is the magic code which we entered. So the moment we entered this content, magic code, the query on the program has changed to something like this. What you see here, a blue, red and gray combination. This is the way the query has changed now. What does it mean? Select star from users where login is equal to single quote, nothing but empty, or 1 is equal to 1. So 1 equal to 1 is true in any language, right? Anything in the world says 1 equal to 1 is always true. I can also put a equal to a, x equal to x, anything that makes the sentence true. That is the logic over here. Then I put single quote semicolon. This is nothing but I'm ending the query over here. I'm forcing the query to end over here. And with double hyphen, I'm trying to comment the rest of the content. So this double hyphen decision has to be done based on the database. So when we perform testing, we'll have to understand what is the target database. Sometimes we use double hyphen, sometimes we have to use hash based on the databases. If it is a MySQL, we use a hash. If it is a Oracle, MySQL and all, they use double hyphen and hash. So it depends on database, but the logic is the user's entered content is actually taken as part of the database query, which is trying to comment the rest of the part and trying to make the sentence true. And thus, my query is successful on the application and it is allowing me to log in into the system without even the right credentials. This is how the SQL injection works and the weakness in the server side. So how do we protect this? Simple. We need to do a validation of this $username in the very beginning place. Without sending it to the query itself, we have to perform some validation over here. So I hope SQL injection is clear. So can you tell me why we were able to log in as administrator? Any guess? It's not that only one user is there. There are around 3 to 4 users are there in the application. But why I was able to log in as admin? Why wasn't I being pushed as any other user? Any reason? What could be the reason for that? Can someone say and throw something on that? Yes, of course, to get all privileges, that is true. But I did not enter the username admin anywhere, right? How then single quote or 1 equal to 1 have taken me to admin user session only? No, even if I use a different browser, even then I will be taken to the administrator. It is not trying to utilize the existing session. So yes, exactly. The first row. So the designing of the database is also very important for anybody. First row of the database may be having an admin. Generally, SQL queries usually works in the first in, first out fashion. So any row that gets true, very first case, that row is getting resulted in the application here generally. Yes, Chaitanya, very good. That is the reason for the admin to be accessed onto. So I'll just show another glimpse of the same thing to just confirm the reason for admin. So I just go to the products page. As you see here, the products page, over here, I enter seasonal product. There are some 4 products listed here and it is asking me to search. If I don't enter anything and search, there is no result. I enter the product name and say it is searching and giving me. So this behavior, what does it mean? A user entered data is taken by the application. Application sends that to the database. Database searches for that content in its content table and gives the result. Now this scenario, I will take an advantage. As a hacker, I will see what are all the different content that is there in the user table. Now this table must be fetching data from the products table. We know that this application is having SQL injection problem. So why don't we try seeing the user table data in this content, in this page? So let us go, like I'll just let the same product name be, and I'm ending with a single quote. Then I will say union. So I hope union you are aware of. We can execute two queries in the same set. Say for example, select star from user, semicolon double hyphen continue. I'll just copy this for a safer side and say search. Yeah. See, you can see the user table data over here. This is the first row that is there in the admin. If I delete this row, whoever is the first, we will be able to logging into this username, password. This might be the role, and this ID is maybe the role 0 and 1. This boolean value is trying to say which will be the admin user. So it's very easy. If I insert, I don't need to use the admin user itself. I insert a new query and make myself as admin also. So this is how SQL injection happens, and these are the reasons for attacks. We need to protect the application by performing proper validations, also designing the database well, as well giving the right privileges to the database users. Using the same SQL injection, if the database is not protected or not limited with a user, we can perform OS injections, command injections from the same database queries. Database related queries are there through which I can interact with the operating system. So that is what is the impact of SQL injection. Similarly, equal and more impact is there for LDAP injections, HTML injections, and so on. And so injection is the one of the top 10 vulnerability in the as per OWASP. So for other types, we usually insert contents with script tag, object tag, applet, embed, and various other tags. So anything that you inject and application is accepting without doing validation, that gets automatically successful on the applications. So to avoid these injection attacks, what we need to do, we need to avoid interpreter kind of a behavior. It is always preferred to go with a prepared statements or a stored procedure context in the programming languages. So if you take current Java, PHP, all the languages, all the frameworks are supporting the prepared statements context, prepared statement concept. That is nothing but the compiled version of the queries. So in this case, what happens is the SQL query, whatever the developer is writing in the program, that gets pre-compiled. Later, the user's data is getting binded with the compiled query. So in such case, our injected data is also considered to be the data, actual data. And so the injection is not successful. So one has to use prepared statements in the applications. Then encode every user input properly, validate the content, always prefer doing a whitelisted based of validations, and always minimize the database privileges to reduce the impact of a flaw by any chance if it is there. So you can also refer the cheat sheet below given over here for details on how to fix the vulnerability. For developers, it would be more useful. So yes, so let us have a simple question over here. We have seen an SQL injection, and also initially I explained SSL how it works. So HTTPS or SSL protects the application from injection attacks. Can people put up the answer in the chat box? Yes or no? And if yes, what is the reason? If no, what is the reason? A, B, C, D. C, B, D. Okay. Any more answers? Okay, great. So most of you are near to the answer. HTTP is secure because it is. Of course, HTTPS is secured, but as we discussed, it secures only the transport layer. And as you see, the entire SQL injection, whatever is happening at the application. Any data, say if there is a HTTPS, if I enter a magic code, what happens is the single quote or 1 equal to 1 semicolon double hyphen is also encrypted by SSL. Safely takes it through the firewalls, through your IPS systems, everything safely sends the communication until the server. Server executes it and gives the response back. Every data is coming back securely. So the attack injection is also happening safely over there. SSL cannot protect SQL injection or any other kinds of injection attacks because SSL works at the transport. It do not perform any kind of a validation. It only performs encryption. Its job is only to do encryption. It does not do a validation. If it does a validation, then yes, what you said is correct, but it doesn't do. HTTPS works at the transport layer. It do not know what is correct, what is wrong. It only knows that it need to encrypt. It is a data, it is injection, it is malware, it is a ransomware, anything it is, it encrypts and sends safely to the server. So the answer is no, because it only performs encryption and it cannot perform the validation onto the data. Hope this is clear. So with this, we'll move to the next vulnerability, broken authentication. So broken authentication is something related to maintaining the right user management or session management. So in fact, session management is a very, very important thing for applications, and we see lot of applications are being vulnerable to this kind of improper session management kind of attacks. So without going into in depth onto all of these things, I'll just move towards the scenario. Yeah, this is a simple example that I would like to show. I'm giving an example of PHP, but don't worry about the syntax. Just this is in English only, I have put the program. What you can see in the purple box in the top left is the very first screen. Generally, any developers, the way we write is, if a user session is existing, then I check whether he's an admin. If he's admin, I give him admin page. If role is admin, include admin. If role is not admin, then include user page. Now in the admin page, what I do, again, I check whether user session is there. If yes, I'm welcoming the administrator. In user page, I'm welcoming the user page. Now, for any application, the entry is, if he is coming from this purple colored box, automatically the system will actually verify his session, then he's verifying the role and he's taking to the right page. But the moment I know admin user.php names, any user once logged in, we cannot consider that he would behave the same way. It means that I logged in, I entered a user credential, I am taken to the user.php page. In the URL, I just change user.php to admin.php. In this context, whatever is there in the red box, will I be able to see the admin page? Of course, I will be, because here in admin page, what is happening is only verification of the user session. But whether what user is the admin or not is not verified. So the context of authentication and authorization comes here. So what is being verified in admin page is authentication. Whether the user is authenticated or not, they are checking, and then I'm giving him the page. But whether he is an authorized user or not is not verified. This is the poor way of coding. What you see in the purple and red boxes is the poor way of coding. But so purple is the right, but red box where you are actually giving the privileged page, this is an improper way. The right side, the green colored box, what you see, this is if this page, admin page, it's trying to verify the session, nothing but authentication. Then it is verifying whether the role is admin or not, nothing but authorization. So if a user logs in and if he accesses admin.php, he will definitely be pushed out, because though he is having a valid session, he is not an admin, and so he won't see the administrator welcome page. He will say, it will throw an error, you are not an authorized user. It is a simple way of writing a program. Unfortunately, this verification is also being observed to be missing in most websites nowadays, and thus this vulnerability is identified to be the OWASP A2 vulnerability in the web applications. Improper session management, broken authentication, broken authorizations. All of these are pertaining to various attacks related to sessions. One of it is this authorization bypass, and the others are related to how session IDs are being managed. Session fixation, session hijacking are different types of attacks due to which attacks are happening. So session fixation is another vulnerability which is most seen in the applications. Today's frameworks are also having this issue, but with a small hook, we can enable session fixation vulnerability to be fixed, but it is not happening. So what is session fixation is something like this. Forget about the pictures. I am just moving step by step. You can follow my screens. So there is a client initially, right? In the left side, there is a client or an attacker. There is a victim over here, and this is the server. Okay, the top left is the attacker, bottom left is the victim, right side is the server. Now, what happens is an attacker first sends a GET request to the server. Server gives a response where it will set a session ID to be ABC321. And the small example, small session ID we gave for easy understanding. Generally, sessions are always 32 digits length. So server have responded with the session ID ABC321. Now, what attacker does? Attacker sends a request, a malicious link with this session ID being set with the target application server, session ID 321. Victim gets that, if at all victim hits that particular link, with session ID ABC321 is set in his browser, and immediately from the victim's browser, the communication goes to the server. Server responds back saying authentication is successful. So if you see here at this particular time, ABC321 session ID is active at the victim as well as at the attacker. Attacker is already authenticated with that ID. He now sent a malicious link with the victim with the same session ID. Victim also accessed the server with the same session ID. He logged into the system. Now the same session ID is there. Now victim also uses the application, attacker also is using. At that point, whatever application attacker does the communication, it is done in the victim's session ID, using the victim session ID itself. This is what is the session fixation. This is called as the session being fixed by the attacker, which is forced by client to and authenticating a server using the same session ID. This is called a session fixation vulnerability. And finally, attackers victim's authentication page is accessible to the attacker without even knowing the victim's username password. So in this case, I don't need to hack his username password. I don't need to hack anything of his Wi-Fi or anything. I just send a session ID because the application is vulnerable to session fixation. Assume IRCTC website is having session fixation issue. So one can book tickets on somebody else's account without his credentials, without his wallet. If nowadays wallets are also being filled up, I can utilize this wallet amount for my ticket bookings. Many more things can be done, right? Yes, it is possible on the internet, so not only in the lab. A simple check for this is, for example, one is how the developer handles. But if you want to know how we can verify whether this vulnerability is there in our application or not, simple mechanism is open the application. For example, this is the page, right? I'm not logged in over here. Now you just access your function F12, access this particular page and see the session ID over here. In your request header, you will usually have this. This is the session ID. What I have highlighted here, JSession ID, right? You see the session ID. Now afterwards, this is ending with what? 4685, right? So now I log in into the system. Now again, you see what is the session ID? 4685. It means this application is vulnerable to session fixation before logging in and after logging in. If your session ID is same, it means the application is vulnerable to session fixation. I can actually, what we can do in a way, when we are performing attack, what we do is in this session ID, I even set my own session ID also, ABC1234. And then we can send the communication. There are applications, frameworks which support this. If I set a session ID like this and send, the user's session after I log in into the system gets binded with this session ID. And I can send this session ID to any number of people. So a simple check is before logging into the system and after logging into the system, what is the session ID? Is it same or different? If it is different, then session fixation is not possible. If the session ID is same, then the session fixation vulnerability is there on the application and that developer has to fix it immediately. So this is one of the vulnerabilities related to session hijacking and all you may be knowing. How the attacker on the internet get to read my session ID. That's what, sir. They don't read it. As you see here in the steps, I'm not reading your session ID. For example, let me annotate over here. For example, just open up. Just go. What I'm doing over here is, for example, this is myself, right? This is my system, attacker system, and this is your system. This is Indraveni, and this is your PC, Himanshu's PC. I am not taking your session ID. What I'm trying to do is on the server, I'm just trying to send a communication where I set the communication, I get authenticated. After sending username password, I entered the username and password. Then the server gives me a session ID ABC, right? Now what I will do is, in this scenario, this same session ID, ABC123, I'm just trying to set it and send to you over here. From here to here, that ABC session ID I'm setting in a request and creating a malicious link. Creating a malicious link is not a big deal, sir. We can just create a link. For example, my server, domain target server over here is bank.com. So bank.com and then send a request header. I can preset what all headers should go. Over there, I will set cookie is equal to ABC. This entire request I will load into a packet and send it to you as a link. You are using over here. When you click that particular link, what happens is you will see a normal page. You will enter your own credentials over here. When you enter your own credentials over here and log in, the application has binded your session with this session ID, ABC123. The moment it is binded, the ABC session ID is known by attacker. Attacker itself have sent the session ID to you. Once you log in with your credentials get binded with this session ID. Then you are also logged in, attacker also is logged in with the same session ID. Now he will be able to see your page using that session ID, which is already available with him. That is called as the session fixation. So here I am not accessing your system. You are using session ID which I have given to you. So whatever access you are doing, I can see it at my system. That is what is the session fixation over here. So the simple check is before and after, if the session ID is same, always such websites are easy to perform a session fixation attack on the systems. And HTTPS is not again a solution for this. Though we have HTTPS, session fixation is again possible. As you see, we're not attacking anything. We are sending a request to you. I can even hardcode the session ID and send you a HTTPS request also. That is also possible. But if you see the other vulnerability, session hijacking, over here, an attacker is sitting in between and sniffing the session ID. This attack can be secured if you have HTTPS. Because in HTTPS, the session ID will be encrypted. Nobody can see that. And so session hijacking won't be possible if you have a HTTPS. If credentials are not known, how to check the session fixation? We have to know session fixation is something that we are trying to understand how the target server is creating the session ID. So if you have to know how it is creating session ID, we have to log in into the system. Otherwise, we won't be knowing that. Either we can do a registration and then perform a login into the system, because fixation is related to before and after login, how the session is managed by the application. So we need to have the credentials of a given application. Is that right? Okay, sir. So that's how the session fixation happens. Moving towards, these are certain things which you can definitely refer later on. And sensitive data exposure and all, these are very normal things which you can definitely understand. I'll try to put some highlight onto important things. Like one is XML entity XML external entity, which is a vulnerability related to web services. I'll just show you a scenario of how it happens. This is some background about how web services work. So what happens is, generally this picture you see, there is a page which is trying to communicate with server using XML data. In the top left, you can see here, there is a post request that is going over here with username, password, email, and all of these things. And server is saying abc@cdac.in is already registered. Now, when this behavior is observed, that is my part of my content that I'm sending in request is getting shown over here. When I see this behavior, I try to see, and especially whenever there is an XML based input going from request, there are high chances for us to verify this kind of a check. Nothing but doc type. In XML, doc type is the content which is actually trying to define some variables in the XML. So this is a payload wherein I am trying to fetch etc password file. As you see here, /etc/password is the file which I am trying to fetch from the variable XXE. I have set a variable to fetch this file. And I'm calling that variable over here. In the email, you see in the last &xxe is there. So I'm trying to fetch as part of my XML only this variable. So immediately when this variable is being passed, this application is reading this abc at cdac.in. When it is read, automatically it is also reading the variable and it is executing. At that point, it is trying to read this file from the server. The server's password file get displayed over here. This is how the XML entity injection is possible, XXE vulnerability. So wherever there is a request where you see an XML input is going, over there we can perform various tags, like we can insert multiple tags, we can insert system level commands like this. We can even redirect a user to phishing websites. We can even do the port scan on the server. For example, I see an XML in XXE vulnerability. I can do a port scan or IP scan internal to the LAN of the server of the DMZ environment, and I get a result of how many servers are there, how many ports are running on those each servers. Also, we can see to that extent XXE injection can be exploited. So that is how the XXE happens. And this presentations may be there for you to access. So I'm sorry, because of no time, I'm not giving you time to read on the contents. However, the other vulnerabilities are mostly which we have discussed about sessions in the parameters, get parameters and all. People try to post the values, variables, account IDs like this 60656066. By tampering the ID, we will be able to see other user accounts and all. So generally, they don't verify the authorization, the same problem. User is authenticated, but he is authorized to see other user account or not is not verified by application. This is called as a broken access control vulnerabilities. So such checks have to be done. The mitigation steps are given in clear cut over here. And misconfigurations are related to having default web server pages like this. Earlier we have seen 500 error, right? That is also a default error page. Such error pages, such customizations have to be done. These are all part of operating system hardening. If operating system is not hardened, we don't need to bother about the application at all. We can perform the attack on the system by misusing the web server related vulnerabilities or OS related vulnerabilities. So these are certain scenarios that are given, how the informations can be revealed out from the web servers. So cross-site scripting is an attack related to injecting, it's similar to injections, but it injects the JavaScript. Through JavaScript, one can perform phishing attacks, redirecting a user to phishing pages, hacking the session IDs. These kind of attacks are possible using cross-site scripting. So insecure deserialization and these things are a little more technical, which would be difficult to understand. But the way I've told, like XXE can be exploited to fetch out the system level commands. Insecure deserialization also, these are all specially crafted payloads which we can send to servers, and you can see the output of server. That is, I can execute a uname-a. For example, maybe this screen is not so much visible to you, but it is a uname-a command I'm executing from the application. And you can see the server is resulting me uname-a output of the server. In a Linux, if you execute uname-a, it gives you a result of the Linux kernel version, right? So you can see the kernel version is resulted in the application. How can a web browser execute system level commands? The problem is the in-between programming language, in-between web servers which are managing these applications are having a control on the operating system. And so the validation is most important. For all of these problems, 90% of these issues are due to improper validations. So insecure deserialization is also an extent wherein we can perform system level commands. Yes, sir. If you have, because we are not performing XXE through SSH, we are performing XXE through web. So through port 80 only, I'm accessing your application. Once I'm into your application is sitting within the system. So inside the system, all these commands, system level commands are localhost for it. So I don't need an SSH over there. From XXE, I can execute system level commands. And lastly, I wanted to highlight on insufficient logging and monitoring because that is most important nowadays. So insufficient logging and monitoring is something related to after the security incident happens, how do we identify what happened? For that purpose, this has been brought out by OWASP Top 10. Attackers rely on lack of monitoring. See, if we are not monitoring an application, we do not know. See, most of the attacks, I used to have a few slides in the earlier, wherein I project that 90% of the attackers' time is spent on the information gathering. The 10% of time only is spent for actual attack. It means that 90% of his time, it means thousands of time attacker have already accessed your system in different means by sending different payloads. So our firewall, our idea should be intelligent enough to identify that some guy is continuously trying to access my system in different mechanisms. It means he is trying to gather some information from my system. So there are chances of attacks from that particular user. So because of this, monitoring has not been happening at the organizations. Number one, the monitoring doesn't happen, manpower is not there. But if manpower is there, but the application or system is not capable to logging in, so even if I deploy 10 people to you keep monitoring my servers, there is no use. There are no logs which will tell that something is happening. So managing or having proper logs in every application is very important. Logs means I'm not only talking about the web server logs or the access logs or something. Today, the audit trails are something which we are talking about in this case. Audit trails means, say for example, take a e-procurement websites. Most of you might have seen so many procurements, tendering kind of things, right? Or your organization must be having an employee management system kind of a things, wherein thousands of employees log in into the system, apply for leaves, apply for so many things, apply forms and all these things. In such an environment where there are so many users accessing the system, definitely there should be audit trails which will try to help an administrator to see when a user logged in, when did he log out, from the login to logout, what all activities he has done, which all pages he have accessed. All this information should be there on the system along with the IP address of the user. These logs help a lot to perform a post analysis on any security incident that happens, and also to take necessary actions by the system administrator and web administrators to protect the environment. Is your application vulnerable? You just answer to these questions. Does your systems log successful login, failed logins, high value transactions? Are they getting logged or not? Are your systems logging warnings and errors properly? Does it hold the IP address of the source? Does it hold the successful code over there or not? All of these questions you answer. If any of these questions answer is no, it means your application is not having sufficient logs. So we need to mitigate them by enabling proper logs, have proper audit trails. That helps us to ensure logs are there so that something happens also we can properly place the right control to protect the application from different attacks. So this is an overview about the OWASP top 10. In between, I skipped few which are easily understandable. In case you don't understand, we can definitely discuss through the learning management system you have access or any other means. You can even contact ic@cdac.in. I will be reachable through that. So with this, my session on this is done. So these are certain references which you can refer to. OWASP testing guide for security testing people, and OWASP cheat sheet. You can, if there is a developer who is looking for how do I protect my application from all of these vulnerabilities, cheat sheets will help the developers to put the right code or secure coding over there. So any questions? Any questions? So with this, my session is done. So any questions we can take up in 5 minutes? Yeah, there's one question. Is it mandatory for a WAPT auditors to follow OWASP guidelines? It is not mandatory, but yes, following some guidelines will definitely help us not to miss out any important checklist over there. And OWASP is one of the guidelines which is actually trying to look into all aspects of the applications. If you see OWASP checklist or something, it having almost 165 checklist items. So we don't miss any part of the application while auditing generally. So it is good practice. It's not mandatory. I don't say it is mandatory, but it is of course a good practice so that we don't miss out anything. So Government of India guidelines are, yes, Government of India guidelines, GIGW guidelines definitely helps, but it is having a single line or few lines that you have to properly validate your applications. You have to properly whitelist and based validation should be done. These kind of things are there, but GIGW is about compliance in terms of maintaining the nationalism in the website. whether you're having an emblem or not, you're following accessibility guidelines or not, the font sizing is there or not, backgrounds in a black and white context and white and black context, such kind of a visibility guidelines are also there in the GIGW. So if you are looking for complete security perspective, OWASP is one of the way, but yes, SANS also is having certain guidelines, ISAC also is having certain guidelines for applications, and there are many more. And context to context also guidelines changes. For example, if you're taking care about health system, HIPAA guidelines is something which one has to follow for securing or ensuring security in the hospital management kind of an applications. If it is a banking kind of an environment, PCI DSS compliances, and there are some guidelines for developers in PCI DSS also. Those need to be followed. So context to context also application changes. So STQC audit means STQC is basically quality certification. But STQC also does security testing. But quality testing do not cover security testing. So what we were discussing so far is about security testing. So if quality testing means it is something related to functionality, whether your website is asked to put up a feedback page, STQC verify whether feedback page is there or not and says, yes, feedback page is there. But feedback page is securely designed or not is what is covered in the security testing. So STQC does both, but what is that? Quality testing or security testing is what you should find out.